Richard Gaubert and Matt Sophos, welcome to the Game Informer Show, guys.
Glad to be here. Thanks, man.
It's an honor to have you. I think, God of War fans out there, which at this point is probably north of 3 million people based on sales copies and the quality of the game. A lot of fans out there have probably heard a lot of interviews with Cory Barlog, creative director. He's been out there. I think he's done an interview with every single person under the sun. But there's 2 other names in the credits for other writers on this project. It's like, I want to know more about those guys. And that's you.
That's us. And there's, we've had a couple of our narrative designers as well, Orion Walker, Adam Dolan. They are just as responsible for a lot of the writing in the game that is being praised and just so humbling.
Yeah, it's great to hear. So where did you guys come from? You two specifically, what's your path through the industry that led to you guys working on a God of War game?
Well, before I say anything, I just want to say that I have a toothache right now, and I want you to keep that in mind when you hear my answer.
Okay. All right. Good to know.
Well, I personally started back in 1999 at a company called Ion Storm. I worked on a game called Anachronauts.
Yeah.
With Tom Hall and Jake Strider-Hughes. That was my first game in the industry, and I cut my teeth on that, and it was a fabulous experience. I learned a lot, and after that time, I did a lot of jumping around to different companies. It was my wilderness years, a lot of contract work, a lot of fear, and went to many different places, and I ended up at Spark, and I worked on Lost Planet 3 with this gentleman. I was the lead designer and lead writer on it. And we worked together on that. Yeah,
we worked together. Our careers have. People talk about us like we're an old married couple because my first gig was also at Ion Storm. I actually joined there as an artist and level designer on Anachronauts. Before that, my background was in journalism writing. I did sports writing and stuff like that in college. I was working for a radio station in Dallas. And I had a good buddy who was the lead artist who right after high school, he knew he wanted to go into games. When I went off to college, he went right into working in games and graphic design and stuff. And he got the lead artist job at Ion Storm. And when he came back to Dallas after having lived in LA for a while, he was like, hey, you should, I think you'd really like this. I think you should do this. So I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And so when he would go off to work, I'd go to his apartment and I'd work on his computer and just kind of build levels and things like that. And eventually he was like, all right, I think you're ready to come up. And so I just went with him to work one day. He had an extra computer in his cube, and I just started working on things. I was a map janitor is basically what I called myself. I was fixing levels that were broken and whatever. And then I did that for a couple months, and then Tom Hall, who had hired Rich, Rich was there before I got there. He was like, I never hired you. I don't, but you're doing good work and everybody seems to be happy with it. So you want a job. So that's how I got into the industry.
That's a tough lesson to impart to other people.
Yeah, it really is. And, I've had people ask me, how I got into the industry and I'm like, well, don't try that one. Because I think that would be more likely to get you arrested for just showing up at a company and sitting at one of their computers and starting working. But yeah, no, it's, I think back then it was such a Wild West mentality. This is, 19 years ago. It was such a Wild West thing where everybody did a little bit of everything. That now that there are schools dedicated to learning how to work in game development, game design, production, art, all that kind of stuff, it's such a different world. But yeah, and then your career takes a really weird path. I went from there to EA and EA to Climax Games on a Silent Hill game, and then startup company, then to Seven Studios, then to Spark, and then here.
And then the grand reunion of you two at Spark.
Oh, we actually, skipping a lot in between. We worked together at Ion Storm. We worked together. I got the gig at Climax early, and he'd already been out in LA for quite a while. It's where he was from, and I said he should come in and help work on this PSP Silent Hill Origins game when it was being developed there. And then we worked at Climax together. Then we did the startup together, where we worked on it was a HBO project. They were funding a development a game that didn't end up shipping or anything. They were funding something to coincide with the Pacific, Band of Brothers of the Pacific.
Oh, interesting.
So we had worked on that together, and then Spark, I guess,
And then Spark,
where
and
we
then-
worked on a licensed thing that also ended up not going because our publisher got bought by another publisher and things happened.
You've seen a lot
And
of
then
chaos
Lost
in the
Planet.
industry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
talking about the Wild West and everything. I mean, once it became clear that there was not going to be a Lost Planet 4, and I saw that there was a posting for a senior narrative designer at Sony, and I got in a very weird way, which is I interviewed for the job and I got it.
What?
Which has the 19 years I've been in the industry, the first time that it's ever gone down that way. It's
Wild
usually
card.
You know someone or they know your work, and there's just some weird way that you get in. This was the first legit interview.
You got cold. Yeah, it was.
And
cold,
maybe that's how it is now. I'm not sure. But
So in that interview, I mean, did you have examples like clips from Lost Planet 3? Had people played Lost Planet 3 and they're impressed by the story and the writing throughout that game? Did it come up a
I
lot
don't
in that
think
process?
many people played Lost Planet 3.
no, and it had not come out yet when I had interviewed for it. So it was I couldn't show them that. I could just kind of talk about it.
Yeah. How do you guys feel about Lost Planet 3 in retrospect?
I'm really proud of it.
Yeah.
Like we did. I was the creative director on it, and Rich was the lead designer. And I think in retrospect, a lot of people really loved the story, and I loved the story and the characters that we created. And Capcom gave us a very wide berth to really play within their sandbox. And I felt like we added something to the franchise, and we used parts of what they had there. It was a prequel if anybody doesn't know anything about it. And I love the characters we created. I love the relationships I formed working on that game. And thankfully, I think people view the story and view the characters in a very positive way. And the beauty of it is, that people tend to forget that we were just as responsible for the gameplay, which was vaguely mediocre and at various times. But they just remember the good things. Although I'm now reminding people of the other stuff. So
No, I started playing it this weekend, actually, like the first hour and a half or so. And it is impressive out of the gate. Maybe before the gameplay mediocre stuff sets in. Like the writing, it feels, and the deliveries are all really natural, much more than you'd expect. So I hope that at least people are finding it now or appreciating it more in retrospect. I don't know how many diehard God of War fans have gone back to it now, but there's got to be some people out there, right?
I think there are some. I know that I've had various designers on this project going, hey, look, there's a Reset Era a thread about you and Rich and having worked on Lost Planet. And I go to look at it, I'm like, oh, God, what is this going to say? And I look at it, and it's generally positive and talking about the good things about the game. And I'm like, okay, phew.
We got a nomination from the Writers Guild for Best Video Game Writing that year, but we were up against Last of Us, so you can imagine what that was.
That's tough. Sorry, Last Planet. It's not going to make the cut.
No, and what was great is we met Ariel Lawrence, who was working here on God of War Ascension, and we met several other people. I think it was Assassin's Creed and Arkham Origins, Batman Arkham Origins, and we just all knew. It was very kind of freeing because we all just knew at one point where it's like, oh, well, Last of Us is gonna win, so we can sit at the table, we can drink, we can do whatever we want because we're not getting called up there.
It's tilt these glasses. Yeah, it doesn't even matter at that point. So both you guys have seen so much chaos in the industry, jumping from places to places. I'd imagine, and you mentioned it's fear also coming from just jumping around that much. I just want to know what it's like to land a job on God of War then, because from the outside, seeing this game, it is mind-boggling to think how expensive it was, and just the effect, just the idea that it is so focused, it's a cohesive vision at the end of the road, seems impossible. So what's it like to be on the inside? Do you see that and just see this as like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity in the game industry that everything happened to come together?
Yeah, but I think fear is going to be a recurring theme here because you look at it now and it looks all polished and beautiful and of course this is what the game is, but when you're making it and you're in there, it looks like crap. You don't know what it's going to be. You don't know what it's supposed to be. You're scared. Everyone's going to hate it.
You're worried that longtime fans are going to reject what you're doing with Kratos. One of our things that we said from the very beginning was, when it comes to the kid, we have to do no harm. At baseline, he can't be annoying.
Right.
That's, and anything we get above that is gravy. And we lucked out with a really good actor and who could carry a lot of the emotion that we had to put behind it. It's ridiculous. Like, when I first interviewed here, and I interviewed with Corey, I walked in expecting something very different, because here I am. I'm like, okay, sweet. Okay, God of War, Sony Santa Monica. That's a big deal, big franchise. I'm Greek. My dad, when I was a kid, he literally would read me the Odyssey and things like that.
Aesop's Fables.
I'm expecting, okay, I got this. It's Norse mythology. I was just like, oh, crap. But, getting the opportunity that we got to really kind of craft things how we wanted to. And Norse mythology is so, it's so driven in people's minds by what Marvel does at this point. But like the baseline of Norse mythology even is so not well known that it gave us a lot of freedom to kind of do what we wanted with it. And it was freeing and wonderful, and the amount of support that was put behind it, both from a studio standpoint and then from a global Sony standpoint, it's just mind-boggling. So far beyond anything that we could ever expect.
What is that learning curve like? Are you just giving yourself a crash course on God of War? Are you just bugging Corey with 1,000 questions about, like, what are the limits of this IP in your mind? What are the do's and don'ts for Kratos? Is it tough to get up to speed on this franchise with such a long history?
Somewhat, but like we have a lot of people in this studio who had been on the other ones. So we always had someone that we could lean on, both from a production standpoint or Corey. Corey was really great about like pulling us back when he felt like we went too far on things, or even pushing us when we needed to go a little bit further. You can even see from the little bit of Lost Planet that we did that it was more character introspective and quiet and whatever. And a lot of times, because we always, for the most part, worked at places where you always had to be mindful of blowing something way out of scope. You can blow things out of scope here, and I don't want production to come down on me for that. But like, there was a lot of times where it's like, no, you can go bigger here. You can do something way bigger here. Because we're so mindful of like, well, that's going to cost a lot of art days, a lot of effects days. That's probably out of bounds. And it's like, no, that's not out of bounds. You want to have like a massive hammer crash on the ice, or you want to have like a giant come to life or whatever. Just do it. And it's like, okay, we're writing checks that other people have to cash.
So the story that I know from interviews with Corey, and Richard, feel free to correct me here, is the idea that like in the original drafts, it was a little bit overreaching. There was too much packed into that original idea. And then it was kind of whittled down. And then Matt was brought in the kind of the re-expansion of the whittled down version. Is that the rough timeline we're looking at here?
Yeah, that version, that old version that we ended up not going with was not, there wasn't a lot of stuff, but it was much more plot oriented. There was just a lot more politics. We got more into the world of Norse mythology, basically the politics and how all of the factions kind of work.
Asgard and Vanaheim.
All of that stuff that in this game is sort of implied and it's in the background, but it was much more in the forefront in that version of the game. And it just felt like it was a lot of exposition and a lot of information that was taken away from the core concept of Kratos and his son.
Yeah.
So I think Corey very wisely went, we got to start over.
But that must be a brutal meeting to have, of saying you have to start over.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. But again, it wasn't, we didn't, I wouldn't say that we had the plot broken for the entire thing. We had a lot of kind of ideas and we had a general direction, but it wasn't a fully formed plot or anything. So it didn't hurt as much, I think, as it could have.
Okay. So those early days of working with Corey, is it tough, as creators in your own right, writers in your own right, to get on the same page as someone? And as a follow-up, do you think it's fair to call him an auteur, or how would you describe his role in the process? Like, is it his vision you guys are trying to get up to speed with? How much is it a giant melting pot?
I mean, it started out as his vision, and then it becomes a melting pot, and then it goes back to being his vision, and then back to the melting pot, and then ultimately his vision.
Yeah, I mean, when I joined on, it was, I think they had already done the refocusing on what they on what the core of the story should be. That it needed to be more about Kratos and the kid and their journey, and then Norse mythology becomes the backdrop for it. I think on my first day when I came in and did orientation, I immediately then went to a performance capture stage because they were shooting something for the Greenlight meeting. But getting to know Corey and getting to talk to Corey about what his vision for the game was. I remember like one of the first things I watched, he did this like 3-hour it was on video, like this 3-hour pitch when he was explaining to the whole team what kind of his vision for the game was. And that became a really strong guidepost for us. But then it was very collaborative. We did lots of meetings where Rich, Corey, and I, and at the time, Ariel, Lawrence, we kind of just did many, many meetings where we just kind of like hashed out certain parts of the game and what are the beats that we need to hit and what parts of the relationship do we want to take the characters through. And then he would go off and attend to the rest of the game while we could focus on the narrative side of things.
Yeah.
And it was a very collaborative process.
I was not hired for God of War. I was hired for the project at Sony that was canceled.
Yeah.
And once that project had been canceled, I was kept on. Corey had asked for me to stay on. And I mean, we hadn't really ever talked or anything, so I wasn't sure why he was, saving me. But when I found out, it's God of War, and I inside I was thinking, well, I mean, I love God of War, and I've played them all, but it's not my style. It's very operatic. It's very big, and grand, and like my style tends to be much more intimate and smaller and grounded. And so I was just kind of like, I don't know how this is going to work. And then when I sat down with Corey and he kind of explained that this was going to be about his son and that he wanted to take it into a different direction, it was like, all right, well, I can probably do something here.
Yeah. And even like that rough shift. Go ahead, man.
I was going to say, I think we found a lot of alignment just in the notion that, like, Corey had recently had a son, and I had recently had a son, and Rich had a son, and we were all basically fathers of young boys, and it was just like, okay, this is something this is a story we can tell.
Yeah,
because we can really draw from it.
Well, going off what Richard was talking about there, it's so fascinating to think of, maybe the original version was too big, working in politics, all that stuff of the gods, and then just scaling it back. It like reminds me of like a Team Eco, motto of just design through subtraction. And it feels like there's strength in just storytelling through subtraction. Just whittle it down, whittle it down, whittle it down. As much as it can be about Kratos and Atreus, the better off the overall project will be.
Yeah, I mean, we kept working at it until we really found what the armature of the game was. We had to figure out, we knew kind of a lot of where the plot needed to go. But we didn't necessarily know what the heart of it was for a little while. But that just took a lot of sessions where we were with the board and cards on the board and figuring things out.
And we also needed to learn to withhold more. Yeah. I think at the beginning we said everything, and then it was a very slow process to realize, no, move that to later. Move all of these reveals, keep moving them until you start and you really know nothing, and it really is just about trying to throw out little hints here and there throughout the storytelling.
And it works so well. Like, do you think that comes from just an insecurity of like, it's God of War, let's just give them everything right away so they know it's a God of War game, versus like getting more cozy and comfortable with what the actual game's going to feel like to play?
And I think that's just your instinct, is most writers' instinct is you want to get it all out there. Yeah, and you have to train yourself to you gotta dole it out. It's better when you dole it out.
And it's like you want to provide, here's all the cool stuff, right? And it's like, but that doesn't really, while it's nice to kind of just blow it all out in the beginning to an extent, it actually isn't that great an experience for the player or the reader or the viewer or whatever. And then the fact that we really nicely aligned with design in general on how they ended up wanting to kind of meter things out, it all served the whole a lot better.
Yeah. What was the biggest challenge in the writing process? What was the one thing you had on that whiteboard or the corkboard for so long that was weeks and weeks of meetings of like, oh, I just can't wrap our mind around how to structure this thing?
I mean, there's an initial one that all of the writers had to deal with when they initially come onto the project, which is writing Kratos. Yeah, he's not easy to write. He's a man of few words. And it's not that he's dumb. He's very smart. I mean, he was a general. But there's two things going on here. One, he's speaking Old Norse, and it's a second language to him. This is something people don't think about, but I mean, he wouldn't be talking Greek, right? He had to have learned the language in the time that he was there.
That's
so one,
really
it's
weird.
a second language, and two, he's Spartan, and he's Spartan with his words. Why use words when you can get to something more direct? It's a waste of time to use a lot of words. So basically, that took away our bag of tricks. Usually we rely on humor and sarcasm and all of the, wordplay to kind of get us through scenes. And here you had to be pure and you had to distill everything into the shortest possible sentence. And as writers know, shorter is harder. So always that was the biggest challenge. And it still is a challenge. You constantly go in and reading Kratos dialogue and saying, how can I make this shorter? How short can I make this?
I love the idea throughout the course of the game that Kratos is struggling, like his struggle and his challenges to communicate with his son. It's not anything emotionally. It's just he doesn't know the words for it because he doesn't know Old Norse. It's like, oh, all I know is boy. What else do I got here? Come on, something.
One of the other big challenges was the design. Tended to change a lot. It's a challenge to find the fun of a game, and you find that through iteration.
That's the hard part. Yeah.
The levels and design would change a lot, which meant that your narrative real estate was always kind of changing and shrinking, and
you
had to kind of always move stuff around and just kind of be a traffic cop.
Big puzzles would need to change because, I mean, we did lots of extensive play testing, and that was way to our benefit, but like, huge puzzles would change and stuff like that, and you'd have to go back in and just like throw it away and start over. And so it was a challenge to kind of keep up with the changes while still trying to keep the heart of things and going, all right, identifying, all right, this banter right here is key. We cannot lose it. We have to find space for this.
This banter needs to come out before you get to this cinematic, and sometimes there literally be no place for it, and you have to be clever about where are we going to present this information.
Oh God, that's tough. Like just throw a river in there so they're in the boat for a little bit and they can relax and get some more dialogue across.
Yeah, I mean, and it was like, you've got 20 seconds. Get it down to 20 seconds.
Yeah, I think that like one of a concrete example of it, the Alfheim level, that level was so much bigger at one point, and then it got refactored down to this, and it was already a big level. It got refactored down and different things shifted and whatever. And at a certain point, and I think it was as late as, it was like August of 2017. And we had written Alfheim about 3 times because it was one of the first levels that was built way back, 2014. That like I ended up going in and basically going, all right, here's all of our pieces. And it was a puzzle. I shifted everything around and wrote new threads to like connect everything and threw a bunch of stuff out. And it was just kind of like, at the end of it, it was like, okay, I think this all makes sense. Rich, can you tell me if this makes sense? Because I couldn't tell anymore.
I think ultimately that level.
Oh, what happened to the thing when he said the thing with the stuff and you cut that?
Yeah, I did.
Just release it as like a radio play or something. I'm sure fans would like it. And I definitely want to dive into spoilers and get specific later on for sure. But I think Alfheim ended up working for you guys. I love just seeing kind of the tail end, the tease of like, what is happening in this realm? I feel like it's much more evocative and it ends up working. So good job rearranging stuff, man. With Kratos and the dialogue specifically with Kratos, I think that's a really interesting idea of just trying to find that tone, and it's so tricky. Playing it, I'm wondering if there's any references as like a good example is, I forget which writer, but for The Simpsons, there was the easy reference, like the epiphany of, oh, you just write Homer as if he's a dog that can speak. Like that's all Homer Simpson is, right? And I wonder if you have any of those for Kratos, where like playing it, I thought of, oh, he's a little bit Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy. There's like shades of that in there. Did you have any other common references for trying to nail what he is?
I don't think we had like a very specific, take this and that's Kratos. I think it was more just along the lines of really figure out who Kratos was, understand the old games, and then, let's just keep the dialogue short. If it can be said, and we leaned a little bit too far into this at one point, but if it can be said with like a grunt rather than actual dialogue, then do it. At a certain point, we ended up pulling it back and going, okay, this now it's starting to sound a little ridiculous.
Well, we started using it as a crutch because we were going like, if we couldn't think of a good line, it was like, oh, he can grunt.
You can just say, he can grunt.
Yeah. You guys are out of jobs.
Parenthetical, yeah. The parenthetical for poor Chris Judge was like quizzical grunt, or or like tone ending grunt or whatever, and he'd be like, "You sons of." But then we ended up going back, all right, that doesn't really work. Let's pull some of those out. I mean, he still has his fair share of conversation ending grunts, but like we ended up replacing some of that with dialogue too.
People brought up as being in his DNA, and I think this is right. It's that there's a lot of Worf.
Yes,
I don't think I consciously thought that when we were working on it, but it's in there.
We got a lot of Worf and Alexander stuff at a certain point.
You can't help it.
You actually went back and was like, all right, I'm going to look at these, and you looked at all the Worf and Alexander episodes, and then you were just like, yeah, no, that's not right.
I mean, it ultimately didn't mesh with with what we were doing. But.
So playing this game, there's a couple of moments in this game where there's this fascinating thing that I've seen more and more of in the industry, and I'm curious. It's a little philosophical, but to get your thoughts on it. I think Naughty Dog does it a lot, and I think it works well, but it's this fascinating trend. The only way I can describe it is like the writing and the characters being forced to throw the gameplay under the bus. In some ways, like just little things, and this isn't a spoiler, but there's a certain moment where there's kind of this elaborate thing, and I think Mimir says like, oh great, more death traps. Like that type of thing, like, oh great, here's another wave of enemies. Like, another puzzle? Okay, here we go. What do you guys think about that? Is it tough to be honest with the characters, but the players still have to play this game and to not have them comment on like, all right, I know the character, or the player is probably frustrated by this, so let's vent it through the characters.
That's a well-worn technique of address and dismiss. We used that quite a bit, where it was just like, all right, I think a lot of players, because I'm feeling this when I play the level, a lot of players are gonna think this at this moment, and it's always better to get it out there and acknowledge that the characters see this too. Otherwise, you get in a situation where players are like, well, that's not realistic. That's that feels wrong. But if the characters essentially give you permission to feel like, oh, that's gamey, then it all kind of works. It works better. It works in your favor that way.
I mean, I understand the argument of if they're going to comment on it, then maybe just don't do it. Like maybe that there's a problem with the design of it, but it's a game. It's fun. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
There's no moment where like the designers of those puzzles come up to you guys like, hey, what the hell? Why'd you have Kratos bash our puzzle? It's not fair.
No, I think it was mostly the opposite. We'd have designers going, yes, that was awesome, thank you. Because, they're doing their damnedest to make the game as fun as possible. And like, while they would often consider the narrative before they did certain things, at the end of the day, it's their job to make the experience fun for the player, not necessarily to fully serve the narrative. Although they're doing that at the same time. It's a tough gig. But yeah, when we could kind of put a wrapper around some of the things that might be a little more gamey and unrealistic, that like there would be these massive spike things dropping down on your head or whatever, then that just kind of made the experience better. And I hope they appreciated it.
Yeah.
That they weren't upset by it.
I think it worked out in a lot of cases for sure. Like a lot of people, we did a game club on this podcast where we played through the entire game, got a ton of emails from the community. And there were several emails of people being like, it is uncanny how well Atreus like mirrors my exact thoughts on every moment throughout the game. It is freaky. He is in my head, like that level. So good job on that front, guys.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, just to get this out of the way, I'm so sorry. I know you're just swimming in it. I'm sure everybody in the office is swimming with it. The boy thing. Were there discussions before the game came out of like, hang on, has anybody done a Control F on this script to see how many times we use the word boy in this game?
We haven't yet, and I've been tempted, but I've been mostly resisting the urge to do it. I think that'll be more fun for people to find. I think Corey has kind of told the story before, but like, for the longest time, we called Atreus Boy, mostly initially from the standpoint of we want to, as a quirk of Kratos, is Kratos never really calls anybody by their name. He calls Atreus Boy. In moments of high stress, he calls him Atreus, obviously. He calls Mimir Head.
Yeah.
He calls
Right.
He calls both Brock and Sindri dwarf, or the blue one when it's talking about Brock or whatever.
Yeah.
It feels weird to have Kratos say a name. It just, it felt more natural for him to do that. But then on top of it, we didn't know what the kid's name was for the longest point, And so, Boy just seemed like something that it felt good coming out of Kratos' mouth.
Were there discussions? I know it's impossible to predict a meme, and I'm sorry to even bring up the M word, but were there discussions before the game came out of like, I think people are really going to latch onto this aspect of the game?
Not among us, anyway. I would bet if you asked people on the team that they probably saw it coming.
Okay. So
but for us, it was just like, this feels right for Kratos to say. And then on top of it, Chris Judge, he told me one time when we were in a VO session or whatever, that like when he would have trouble getting back into the voice, he asked if he could say boy at the top of it. Because at that point, boy became Kratos for him.
Yeah.
So like he would use that to get into the voice of the character sometimes. So it was just like, all right, well, that's just it. That's just what it is.
And just so you know, those are all unique boys.
It's
we
true.
Didn't record boy once and keep playing it.
No copy and pasted boys. That's a
boy, all those different ways.
Oh yeah. Every time he says boy, aside from some of the systemic bits, where like they're opening a triptych or whatever, every time in the level banter or the cinematics or whatever, he said that boy every single time.
He was sick of
if
it
he
too.
got paid per boy, he would have made a lot of money too.
So with the success of this game, once it comes out, I want to know what it feels like. Do you have a big whiteboard of stress and anxiety and fear about the process, and that all just gets wiped away when you see glowing reviews and this kind of fan response? How much does the successful release of this game kind of recreate the history of the last several years of your life?
Oh man, a lot. And like
I'm forgetting all the crappy stuff. I really am. Like I'm forgetting all the stress and all the things I was complaining about at the time. It all just kind of disappears once you see how people are responding to it.
My wife will remind me of like, don't you remember that you were just like, whatever.
Yeah, but look at these Twitch streams. Come on.
Look, yeah. No, it's unbelievable. Like, you never expect something like this. And like, I think it's become pretty famous, the video of Corey whenever he starts looking at the reviews and he's weeping. I can't say that I didn't have the same reaction. I watching those things, I was just like, very manly tearing up things. I wasn't crying as much as Corey.
Naturally, yeah.
But no, but like, you're moved by that just because like you hope that it lands. That's all you can hope for. It's only now that we're gonna start going, oh God, now we have to replicate this.
Yeah, but I'm a neurotic writer, and there was a lot of doubts, for years of not knowing if this was the right thing. And now that it seems like this is the right way to do it, now that we're looking at a blank board and putting up the little index cards for whatever project we might work on next. Yes, not saying what it is.
Could be the sci-fi game.
Could be.
It is. I feel very relaxed, which is good. That there's this element of that fear of like, is this right or not, is kind of gone, and we can just kind of focus on the story and the work, and that's wonderful.
Now the fear is all about meeting new expectations that we didn't have before.
Okay, so the fear doesn't go away; it just has shifted its form a little bit.
It shifts. Yeah. It goes to something else.
I got it.
Yes.
I got it.
This is a better fear, though.
It is.
It's a healthier fear.
Okay, this is where things are going to get spoilery, and this is going to be quicker for sure. This isn't the full second half of this interview or anything, so heads up, if you haven't finished God of War, please, please, please stop listening. I don't know what kind of buffer I need to give you just in case this is coming out of your phone on the other side of the room, but just run away. Just run away from the phone if you can't get to it. Please don't listen to this. Will you guys attest to it? Please don't have this game spoiled.
Don't. it won't land as well if you have things spoiled. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Okay, spoiler. Tiny details. This is the crap that I absolutely love. You talk about intimate games. The tiniest detail in this game was like, oh, no other game would say this. It's so amazing. Is that little moment, and this is the most boring way to start a spoiler discussion, so I'm sorry, but the little moment where Freya corrects Kratos saying back of your hand to like take Atreus' temperature. How do you guys think of that? That's so good.
Because it's happened in real life.
Yeah.
It happened where, I did that where, and I think that was you. My wife corrected me. It was like, it's the back of the hand. It just made sense, right? And so much of Kratos and the story is just stuff that has happened to us as fathers, and you don't even have to do very much. Just the fact that it's Kratos and the kid makes it feel bigger than it is.
Yeah. Yeah, you're totally right. It works. Okay, real quick. When you first encounter the humans and there's a line where they're like, Sigmund, your knives. You imagine that being Sigmund from Norse mythology, right? Like that is the Sigmund?
No, that's just a dude named Sigmund.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Okay. I'll scratch that off. Okay. Look
that up.
We were looking, in that case, for just kind of Norse names. That's why, like at one point, if you kill, and he killed Gunther or something. I don't remember what his name was, but like, we're just looking for common names at that point.
Okay. There we go. That's helpful.
If there's a reference there, it was a happy accident.
Yeah. No, it was totally Sigmund.
God, you guys are so damn smart. Okay, this is where, I don't know if you have to light a joint for this question or what, but okay, thinking about realms, how this stuff works. Are all of the realms, okay, I guess the question is Midgard all of the Earth, or is it just that one area? Like, does a section of Midgard extend all the way to Greece? Is there a version of Asgard, which probably we weren't talking about yet, that also envelops the entire world? Basically, do the realms from Norse mythology expand beyond Norse mythology, is the question.
In my mind, you can contradict, and I don't think we ever necessarily said for certain, but like Midgard is Earth. It's,
all of Earth.
It's all of Earth or whatever. But like the people who are involved in Norse mythology, who worship those gods and whatever, are in this section of Earth, and to them, Midgard is to them what to the Greeks, whatever they like, Gaia or the Earth or whatever was to them. It's just Earth to me. I didn't think of them when I was writing anything as completely separate places.
Yeah. So
pretty much. Yeah.
But
Kratos got on a boat and went north, and he found himself in this land that people happen to call Midgard.
Okay. So it's not like in Elfheim, if you keep walking, you can eventually get to the Egyptian version of Elfheim, which would be very trippy and cool.
I guess you theoretically could, because all of our realms, I mean, we established they exist, like Freya says, they exist in the same physical space. They're essentially just kind of like, dimensions on top of each other. That's why the temple, the realm temple, and the bridge can all exist. It exists in all the realms. All the towers, all those things exist in the same realm. So, if you were inside the light temple in Alfheim, and you could theoretically travel right from there to Muspelheim or Niflheim or any of those places, you would be in that location.
Right. Okay, got it. The thing I wanted to get into with spoilers here, talking about trimming sections and whatnot, was the Atreus getting cocky, realizing he's a god, embracing it a little bit too hard. Was that a section that was abbreviated in a big way?
Yes.
Okay.
In a big way, yeah. There was supposed to be another level, basically, that came from coming out of the Tears Vault when they have the father-son wine toast thing. After that, there was supposed to be a whole other level before going through the foothills and everything and up through the mountain again.
Okay, gotcha.
That did get abbreviated. We did our best to band-aid it as much as possible and make it still feel natural. I think if you put the screws to us, we would say that if it's more abrupt than we would have liked it to be. But overall, happy with it. That, there's always the things you wish you could hit a little bit harder, done a little bit better.
Of course, yeah.
Let breathe a little bit more.
Were there like distinct moments that you really regret, or I mean, not regret, but you wish people could have seen? Was Kratos more aggressive towards him about like, hey, knock that shit off, dude?
No, I think for us it was more, we just wanted more of a gentle ramp.
Yeah.
And that you would start to get, I think. We moved some of the stuff into the rune vault, into Tyr's vault, especially kind of the beginning of it when the kid says something about he wouldn't have felt so bad about killing the elves if he knew he was the dark elves if he knew he was a god. And,
yeah.
And they're just going, are we going to just leave that there? We wanted to do more of that, to have the kids. It feels pretty normal, but then the kid says something, and the player. And probably more Mimir than Kratos would be like, what? What did he just say?
Yeah.
And that Kratos, I think something that we did both in the Alfheim level after coming out of the light and in that section, it was kind of like Kratos is okay with just taking it from his kid for a little bit. His son will pop off a little bit and he'll just take it. He won't say anything until he's had enough. And I think for that stretch, it wasn't going to be so much Kratos correcting him, because a lot of the reason why, well, not a lot of, the whole reason why the kid is going down this path is because Kratos won't talk about the perils of what he's doing.
Right.
Because that would be opening himself up for things. So we would have used that stretch a little bit more to more gently ramp the kid up to the point where he snaps at Sindri, and then using Mimir to give the player, notions that something's not right.
Yeah. One of the most brilliant little moments in this game is in that section, where you get in the boat again and Atreus is like, we're gods, we can do whatever we want. What do you want to do right now? And then Kratos just says, I'll show you. And then it's just left in the player's control. That is so effing cool. I love that moment so much. Do you remember writing that specific little beat?
There was a lot of discussion of how to keep things so that players feel okay with exploring or doing critical path.
Right.
But that it's always an option for the player at that moment to do. And it took a lot of different passes of wording to figure out what would communicate that best.
And I love the idea of Kratos.
And in that moment, it was just, hey, we can do two things here at once.
Yeah, I think at one point we had gone down the path of Atreus being the voice of, hey, let's explore. I think Mom would like this. And Mimir being the one saying, but this is the way you're supposed to go. And I think Corey was the one who realized pretty early on that, like, if we have any character saying this is the thing you're supposed to be doing, then players or play testers would feel compelled to, well, I guess I got to do that.
I have to do it.
Yeah,
So,
he's the smartest guy in the world. I think he knows where to go and what I should be doing with my time. Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. So, Corey was very, very smart about saying, let's just leave the Mimir portion out of it and let the kid give the players the option to go off. And then Kratos, as the player, makes the choice of what to do.
That's so good. I just love that he verbalizes it and just basically hands the reins to the player. It's such a cool little moment. Other cool little moment made me laugh out loud. I love when Baldur says, I thought my family was fucked up. It's such a good moment. It's such a good line. So good job, guys. Okay, let's dive into the meat of this thing. Corey, in other interviews, has said that it was you guys driving into work, was his version of the story, that you had the epiphany of, what if Atreus was Loki the whole time? Can you tell the story of how that came to be?
Oh, boy. I think we kind of knew what we wanted to we knew for a while that we were going to have the reveal of Faye being a giant. You know? Although she wasn't named Faye at all, she was always just like Mimir, or the kid being boy. Faye was always just the mother, because we don't want to settle on names. That forces us into a corner. So, but we always knew that Atreus' mother was going to be a giant, and well, you have a good way of kind of explaining this one, but we just kind of knew that we needed something more, and we knew, that if we went one direction, if we were looking forward at what we wanted to plan for, what we would do after the fact, into further games, or what other writers could do further, we wanted to add a little something that was more impactful.
Yeah, it came mostly out of discussing the future.
Yeah.
That idea came out of it, and I think you were going like, well, maybe we should tease it.
Yeah. We were just like, well, yeah, if we put that into the end of this game, not only will that be something that players can just go, what about, but also, it locks in sort of what the next game might be about.
How long did it take Corey to warm up to the idea?
Thankfully, and that was the thing, is once we decided that this is what we needed to do, we took like a few weeks to like go, all right, if we do this, what are the implications of it? What do we need to kind of fix? And what could spill out of it creatively, in the story.
And we were scared to tell him because he might say no.
He
might say no.
Of course, it's huge.
Yeah. But so we lined up everything. We figured out, what the deal was with Jormungandr, who's Loki's kid. We figured out like, oh my God, who Atreus' mom would then be, and that the name should be Faye, because Laufey was Loki's mother in the mythology. And then it all just kind of really, other things just kind of kismet happened where it's like, okay, well, that means that Kratos, if he was called something by the Norse gods, then that would make him Farbauti. And Farbauti, what does that mean? It means cruel striker. And I'm like, well, that's perfect for Kratos. Cruel striker is perfect.
Everything's lining up except for Corey. Yeah.
Yes, basically. Anytime you approach, Corey is handling so many things with the game at all times that it's like, I think this goes for design, art, anything. Anytime you want to go in with a pitch, you kind of want to line things up so that like whatever questions he throws at you, whatever holes he tries to poke, you have an answer for.
Right.
And so I had a piece of paper in front of me with like all these things that I had written down as like, if he asked this, you could say this. If he asked this, you could say this. And then we sat down and kind of just told them the story and kind of said how we thought it would come about, which was basically what the dialogue pretty much ended up being exactly in the game. And I was expecting all these questions, and he was just like, we have to do that. And I was like, but I can give you arguments for why we should do it. But no, it was like immediately. He just realized, yes, we have to do that.
Were you then going back through the script and cutting out references to Loki throughout the entire thing?
No, we actually never referenced Loki in the script, because we were always mindful of, we knew that we had to deal with Odin, right? And we knew that Thor was going to be kind of a big player that gets talked about as well. But we knew that the more we mentioned certain characters, the more players were going to, we felt like they might feel gypped if they didn't actually get to see them or fight them. So, we kind of purposefully left Loki off the table just because it wasn't an element that we felt like necessarily would fit into the themes and stuff that we were trying to tell. Loki's lineage and all that kind of stuff is a little bit weird compared to like, oh, Thor had these two kids and one was strong, and we're like, we know that they're going to be bosses or in the game. So, we didn't have to strike anything from Loki at all.
And I think since we want to save things for the next game, you don't want to lock yourself into anything by writing something in the current game that's going to mess things up for the next one. So I think we're just trying not to deal with too many things, not knowing what the repercussions might be.
Yeah, I think probably from Marvel's influence, but a lot of people have taken that epiphany in the game to be like, oh, so Atreus is going to turn evil. He's going to be this evil little guy. Do you guys necessarily equate that with Loki being an evil god?
Well, I think that if you look at what we did with this game, most of the accepted Norse mythology of the characters who you think of as are the good gods or the good ones, they're the ones who are the biggest assholes.
Yeah.
And so the reverse is probably also true. There are definitely themes from Loki's kind of duality and his being the god, the trickster god that you can probably bet that if we did another one, that would be some things that we would kind of weave in.
Uh-huh. Very cute, Matt. Very cute. If we did another one, who can say? Who can say?
Nothing's announced.
Uh-huh.
So, But yeah, no, I think that thinking that he might turn into an evil god, who knows? Maybe, but
Okay.
we tried to turn a lot of the stuff that was accepted about each of the gods kind of on their heads.
Yeah.
It's always just been in the DNA of God of War. So
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, a couple more quick ones. In your mind, do you mean it to be 100% clear cut that Athena actually appeared there, or do you want it to be ambiguous about whether or not Kratos is just freaking out and losing his mind a little bit?
I felt we probably didn't hit on it hard enough, I guess, but for us, she was never there. It was always when he's in the boat, he actually says, "Get out of my head."
Yeah.
And then when he sees her in the doorway and all that kind of stuff, after you get the blades and you fight and all that kind of stuff, Mimir has dialogue once you're in the realm between realms saying, "I know you weren't talking to me back there." So it was clear that Mimir didn't see her. So that for me was just kind of the way to say, this is all Kratos dealing with his issues, but she's not physically there.
Okay, there we go. In your mind now, Kratos at the end of the game, I mean, he certainly says, he's like, "Oh, I've got nothing left to hide. Here we go." Do you see him as fully relieved from his past? Because from players' minds, it's like, wait, Trey still doesn't know that he murdered his family. There's still a lot of secrets here, dude. You can't stand on top of the mountain and be like, "Game on, past,"
We deliberately held that one back.
Okay.
I feel like that was as much growth as it would have been possible for Kratos to do by the end of the game. Anything past that would have probably felt artificial.
Okay.
I think we had several different, as we were breaking the story of the game in general, we had meetings with Corey and stuff like that. He was like, and he was pretty clear and absolutely right that like, we can't get to the point in this game where Kratos is being altruistic because he hasn't earned that yet. So I don't think that in the same regard, him admitting to that part of his past would have been a step too far, I think.
Yeah.
So in his, he doesn't have anything to hide. He's admitted to the servitude to Ares, and that's what the chains a lot of represent, and the bad things that he's done. But he does keep a piece of himself still.
He's got room to grow.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. Important. What do you think when you read the fan speculation about the Tyr is Kratos stuff? What's your gut reaction to that?
I love all the fan speculation. Both from the standpoint of, well, I can pretend like this was my idea, and also from the standpoint of, well, okay, if this is what, mostly from the standpoint of, if this is what fans are kind of expecting, then we can turn this on its head. And it's fun. It's fun to see what people are kind of fan casting and fan speculating what's going to happen.
Yeah, I was reading a lot of that stuff, and then at some point last week I went, no more. Yeah, gotta try and stay fresh. Forget it. Don't look at it. And we would hate to have it where we come up with an idea and then we throw it out because we see that someone online thought of it.
Yeah,
right.
But it might be the right thing to do for the story. So like I'd rather just not have that kind of wading into things. I'd rather not have that.
But has it shifted? Fan speculation, has it shifted already the way you're thinking about where the story could go in theory?
Not really, actually. I think that for us, in all honesty, most of the time, it's when someone mentions something that is very close to where we were heading with it, it has made us question whether we should do it. And I think that's why Rich is kind of getting at okay, we have to stop looking at it, because we've come to the point where if this is where the character should go, based on the mountain of stuff we created for this last one, then this is where they need to go. And we shouldn't kind of second guess ourselves just based on the notion of, well, we don't want to do it if people are expecting that.
Right.
So it's a bit of a catch-22.
Yeah. Corey, last time he was on this podcast, was talking about the future, and he said that I think it's important to change up the leadership of God of War. He always liked God of War being directed by different people. And I'm curious, what do you think about that strategy, that philosophy of shaking things up if the series ever continues into the future?
Shaking things up is always kind of scary and uncomfortable, but you also create new avenues of creativity that you wouldn't have gotten to if you don't shake things up. So, as is represented by Kratos, change is painful, but it's often a good thing.
He said it so well.
It's really beautiful. Well, overall, guys, I cannot thank you enough for years and years of hard work, and for the entire team over there to put so much effort into this thing. Like, the greatest compliment I think I can give you guys is you made game writing look easy. So congratulations, you guys. It's a hell of a project you guys just finished off there.
Really appreciate it. Yeah, no, can't be more thankful and happy with the reception.
Thank you so much for watching this excerpt from the Game Informer Show podcast. You can subscribe to the audio version and listen to new episodes airing every Thursday. We cover big games on the horizon, games that we've just reviewed. We have long-form developer interviews, a lot of fun stuff. So check it out every Thursday.